Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the mighty Star Crusher, and smiled with satisfaction. For 3,000 years, the hegemony had ruled the galaxy with absolute power. Every species they encountered had the same reaction when they saw the massive fleet approaching their world. Fear, then surrender, then acceptance of their new place in the galaxy. They were perfect beings, evolved on the paradise world of Prime. Their planet had no predators, no natural disasters, and no violence. Over millions of years, they had developed incredible technology and vast intelligence. They saw themselves as the natural rulers of all life in the universe. Looked at the holographic display showing their latest target. A small blue world orbited a yellow star in a quiet corner of the galaxy. The planet was called Earth by its inhabitants, and it was home to a species called humans. The scientists had studied this world from a distance, and what they found disgusted them. Earth was a nightmare world. The planet was covered in deadly creatures that hunted and killed each other constantly. Massive storms destroyed entire regions. The ground shook and split open, swallowing cities whole. Burning mountains spat fire and poison into the air. The very water fell from the sky with such force that it could flood entire continents. The humans who lived on this savage planet were equally barbaric. They fought endless wars with each other using terrible weapons. They lived short, violent lives in constant fear. Their history was written in blood and suffering. The scholars called Earth a death world and wondered how any intelligent life could survive in such a hellish place. "Admiral," called out his communications officer, "we are approaching the target system. The fleet is ready for standard invasion protocol." Nodded. The invasion protocol had worked perfectly for thousands of years. They would arrive with overwhelming force, broadcast their demands, and wait for the inevitable surrender. Most species gave up after seeing just one of their planet-cracking dreadnoughts. The humans would be no different. The fleet consisted of 50,000 ships. Each vessel was a masterpiece of technology, armed with weapons that could turn entire moons to dust. The smallest ship in their fleet was larger than anything these primitive humans had ever built. The Star Crusher alone could destroy a planet with a single shot from its main weapon. As they entered the Earth's solar system, felt the familiar thrill of another easy victory. The human ships that came to meet them were pathetically small and weak. Their weapons were crude projectiles and simple energy beams. Their ships looked like metal boxes welded together by children. Some of them still used chemical rockets for movement. "Open communications," ordered. "Begin standard protocol." The massive holographic image of Admiral appeared above every human city on Earth. His tall, elegant form towered over the primitive buildings. His 4 arms spread wide in a gesture of supreme authority. His silver skin gleamed with perfect health, and his large black eyes looked down on humanity with cold contempt. "People of Earth," his voice boomed across the planet, translated into every human language. "I am Admiral of the Hegemony. Your world now belongs to us. For 3,000 years, we have brought order and civilization to the chaos of the galaxy. We offer you the same gift." He paused, letting his words sink in. Every human on the planet was listening. Every government, every military leader, every citizen was hearing the same message. "You have 2 choices," continued. "Submit to the hegemony willingly, and your species will serve with dignity. You're strongest and will join our workers. Your children will learn our ways and become useful members of galactic society. You will have peace, order, and purpose under our rule." The Admiral's expression hardened. "Refuse our generous offer and face complete extinction. We have destroyed civilizations far more advanced than yours. Your primitive weapons cannot harm our ships. Your divided nations cannot stand against our united empire. Surrender now and live. Resist and watch your world burn." Expected the usual response: panic, desperate attempts at negotiation, and then quick surrender. The humans would see the size of his fleet and realize that resistance was hopeless. Their leaders would contact him within hours, begging for mercy and offering to surrender unconditionally. Instead, something unexpected happened. A response came from Earth almost immediately. It was broadcast on all frequencies, strong enough to reach every ship in the fleet. The voice was calm, steady, and completely unafraid. "Unknown alien fleet," the human voice said. "This is Admiral Sarah Martinez of the United Earth Defense Force. We have received your interesting proposal. After careful consideration by the governments of Earth, we have prepared our official response." Leaned forward in his command chair. This was unusual. Most species begged for more time to consider surrender. Some tried to negotiate better terms. None had ever sounded so composed when facing certain destruction. "Our response is simple," Admiral Martinez continued. "Go to hell." There was a pause, then her voice returned with an edge of dark humor. "Actually, let me translate that into terms you might better understand. Come and take it." The communication ended. Stared at the display in shock. Around him, his officers looked confused and worried. In 3,000 years of conquest, no species had ever responded with such direct defiance. "Admiral," his tactical officer called out nervously, "the humans are moving their ships into attack formation. They appear to be preparing for battle." Laughed, a sound like silver bells ringing. "These Deathworld savages think they can fight us. Very well. They have chosen extinction over civilization. Begin the assault. Show them the price of defying the hegemony." The fleet moved forward like a silver wave of death. Their weapons charged with deadly energy. Their shields glowed with protective power. 50,000 ships prepared to crush the tiny human fleet that dared to stand against them. But as they approached Earth, Admiral felt something he had never experienced in his long life of easy victories. A small flutter of uncertainty in his perfect mind. The humans had not begged. They had not tried to negotiate. They had not shown any fear at all. They had simply told him to come and take their world if he could. For the first time in 3,000 years, the hegemony was about to discover what happened when a perfect civilization met a species that had learned to survive on a planet that tried to kill them every single day. The first ships entered Earth's atmosphere expecting an easy slaughter. Their advanced scanners showed human military bases scattered across the planet, armed with weapons that seemed laughably primitive. Chemical explosives, metal projectiles, and basic energy weapons that would barely scratch armor. Captain commanded the lead assault group targeting the human city called New York. His squadron of 100 heavy cruisers moved toward the city like predators approaching helpless prey. Below them, the massive human settlement sprawled across the landscape, filled with millions of the strange bipedal creatures. "Begin bombardment," ordered. "Target military installations first, then government centers. Standard suppression pattern." The ships opened fire with their plasma cannons. Brilliant beams of energy lanced down toward the human military bases. But instead of the expected explosions and surrender signals, something incredible happened. The humans fired back. Not with their primitive weapons, but with something they had never seen before. Massive metal projectiles launched from hidden positions struck the ships with devastating force. These were not normal weapons. They were improvised cannons built from mining equipment, firing chunks of metal at incredible speed using chemical explosives. "Sir," his weapons officer called out in alarm. "The humans are using kinetic bombardment weapons. They've turned construction equipment into artillery." Before could respond, his ship shuddered under multiple impacts. Warning lights flashed across his bridge as armor plating cracked and systems failed. How were these primitives damaging his ship? The answer came from his science officer, his voice filled with disbelief. "Captain, they're not just firing metal at us. They're firing depleted uranium shells, tungsten penetrators, and something my sensors can't identify. These projectiles are moving at orbital velocities." through his ship's cameras, watched in horror as human soldiers poured out of hidden bunkers. They moved differently than any species he had ever seen. Where other civilized beings would run in panic from spacecraft, these humans ran toward the landing zones, carrying weapons and shouting battle cries. A group of human fighters reached his ship as it made an emergency landing, expected them to demand surrender or try to negotiate. Instead, they began attacking his vessel with handheld explosives, welding torches, and mining tools. They climbed onto his ship and started cutting through the hull with industrial equipment. "They're boarding us," his security chief screamed. "How are they boarding a spacecraft with construction tools?" The humans who broke into his ship fought like nothing had ever encountered. They showed no fear of death, no hesitation in close combat. One human soldier, bleeding from multiple wounds, continued fighting until he collapsed. Another human fighter used his own body as a shield to protect his teammates while they planted explosives in the ship's reactor. Across the planet, similar scenes played out. Human forces were using every available resource as a weapon. Civilian mining operations became artillery positions. Commercial satellites became guided missiles. Even garbage haulers were converted into kamikaze ships, crashing into vessels with nuclear explosives strapped to their hulls. Commander Sarah stood in the control center of Luna Base, humanity's primary military installation on Earth's moon. Her base was surrounded by 10,000 shock troops, the elite warriors of the hegemony. They had been attacking for 3 days, expecting to overrun the base in hours. "Status report," she called to her communications officer. "Ma'am, we've lost contact with sectors 7 through 12. The aliens have broken through our outer perimeter. Estimated enemy casualties are 8,000. Our casualties are 230. Sarah nodded grimly. The numbers should have been impossible. Her forces were outnumbered 50 to 1, using inferior weapons against the galaxy's most advanced military. But her soldiers were doing something they couldn't understand. They were winning. The secret was simple. Humans had learned to fight on a world where everything tried to kill them. They understood tunnel warfare because they had fought in underground bunkers during nuclear wars. They knew guerrilla tactics because they had fought against overwhelming odds for thousands of years. They were experts at improvised weapons because they had learned to make deadly tools from anything available. More importantly, humans understood something they did not: the will to fight when there was no hope of survival. Sarah watched through her perimeter cameras as a squad of human Marines held against 100 alien warriors. The Marines were using mining charges as grenades, industrial cutting tools as weapons, and the base's own life support systems as traps. When they ran out of ammunition, they fought with knives and tools. When they ran out of weapons, they fought with their bare hands. The commander leading the assault, General, had never seen anything like it. His troops were trained for clean, efficient battles against civilized opponents. They expected enemies to surrender when faced with superior numbers and technology. They were not prepared for humans who treated death as just another tactical option. "Report," demanded as his forces pulled back from another failed assault. "General," his aide replied, his voice shaking with confusion, "we have lost another 1,000 troops. The humans are using the base's architecture against us. They've turned ventilation systems into ambush points, maintenance tunnels into sniper nests, and storage areas into explosive traps." Studied the tactical display. By all logic, the human base should have fallen within hours. His forces had overwhelming superiority in numbers, weapons, and technology. Yet the humans continued to inflict massive casualties while taking minimal losses themselves. "How?" he asked. "How are these primitives defeating our elite warriors?" His science advisor, a nervous young officer, provided the answer. "General, we have been analyzing their tactics. These humans appear to have evolved on a planet where survival required constant adaptation to deadly threats. Their entire species has been shaped by warfare, natural disasters, and predatory creatures. The advisor brought up holographic displays showing Earth's history. They fight underground because their planet's surface is regularly destroyed by natural catastrophes. They use improvised weapons because their resources are limited by constant conflict. They show no fear of death because their species has been fighting extinction for their entire evolutionary history. General stared at the data in growing horror. Are you saying these creatures are natural warriors? More than that, sir. They are survivors from a death world. Every human alive today is descended from billions of years of survivors. They don't just know how to fight. Fighting for survival is literally in their genetic code. As if to prove his point, the human base suddenly erupted in explosions. Commander had ordered her engineers to detonate the base's nuclear reactor, turning the entire facility into a massive bomb. The explosion killed thousands of troops and sent a clear message to the invasion force. Humans would rather destroy themselves than surrender. Similar reports flooded in from across the planet. Human forces were inflicting casualty ratios of 20-1 against the galaxy's most elite military units. They were turning civilian infrastructure into weapons, using their planet's dangerous environment as an ally, and fighting with a savagery that terrified the civilized. Admiral received the reports in stunned silence. His easy conquest had become a nightmare. His superior forces were being systematically destroyed by primitives using mining equipment and industrial tools. Worst of all, the humans showed no signs of surrender. For the first time in his long life, felt fear. Not fear of defeat, that was still impossible, but fear of the cost. Fear of what these Deathworld savages might do if they ever escaped their planet. He opened communications to the hegemony capital. Request immediate reinforcements. These humans are not what we expected. They fight like demons and they will not surrender. The response came back within hours. Reinforcements approved. Full battle fleet dispatched. Eliminate the human threat completely. Leave no survivors. But was beginning to wonder if 50,000 ships would be enough. These humans had turned warfare into an art form, and they painted their masterpieces in blood. Doctor walked slowly through the captured research station, studying the alien prisoners with scientific curiosity. The facility had been taken 3 weeks ago by a joint human assault force using nothing but construction mechs and mining explosives. The fact that humans had captured a command ship with civilian equipment was sending shock waves through the enemy fleet. The aliens sat in their holding cells, still confused about how they had been defeated. Their elegant silver forms moved with nervous energy as they whispered among themselves in their musical language. These beings had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years, and they could not understand how primitive humans had outfought their elite forces. Had volunteered to serve as their interrogator, not because she wanted to torture them, but because she wanted them to understand exactly what they had tried to invade. As Earth's leading expert in evolutionary biology, she understood humanity's nature better than most humans did. "Doctor," she said, addressing the lead scientist, "I have a proposal for you." The alien looked up with his large black eyes, his 4 arms folded in what had learned was a gesture of contempt. "I will tell you nothing, primitive. Your victory here was luck. Our reinforcements will arrive soon and cleanse this system of your violent species." Smiled and pulled up a holographic display. "I don't want military information, Doctor. I want to give you an education. You see, your people made a fundamental error when you decided to invade Earth. You assumed we were just another primitive species that could be easily conquered." She activated the display, showing images of Earth's surface. Beautiful blue oceans, green continents, and white clouds created a picture of paradise. "This looks like a peaceful world, doesn't it? Your scientists probably thought Earth was similar to your own planet." The scientist nodded reluctantly. Your world appears to be a standard garden planet with normal evolutionary patterns. That's where you're wrong, said, changing the display. Let me show you what Earth is really like. The peaceful images vanished, replaced by scenes of Earth's true nature. Massive hurricanes that could level entire cities, earthquakes that split the ground open and swallowed buildings whole, volcanoes that spat fire and poison gas across continents, tsunamis that swept away everything in their path with walls of water hundreds of feet high. The scientists recoiled in horror. These are natural disasters, Doctor whispered. Your planet regularly tries to kill its own inhabitants. Every day, replied calmly. But that's just the geology. Let me show you our biology. The display changed again, showing Earth's predators in action. A great white shark attacking prey with rows of razor teeth. A pack of wolves bringing down an elk. A grizzly bear standing 12 feet tall on its hind legs. A crocodile that could crush bones with its jaws. Your world has predators, one of the younger scientists observed nervously. But surely they are not dangerous to intelligent beings. Laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Doctor, every single one of these creatures could kill a human in seconds, and these are the small ones. She showed them footage of a Rex, reconstructed from fossil evidence. The massive predator stood 20 feet tall and weighed 8 tons of muscle, bone, and teeth. This creature ruled our planet for millions of years. It could bite through solid metal, and it was just one of hundreds of species that evolved specifically to kill other life forms. The scientists were silent now, their elegant faces pale with shock. On Prime, the largest predator was a small bird that ate insects. They had never imagined a world where gigantic monsters roamed freely. But these ancient creatures are extinct, Doctor protested weakly. Surely your modern world is more peaceful. Smile grew darker. Let me show you what replaced them. The display filled with images of human warfare, ancient battles with swords and spears, medieval sieges with burning cities and dying thousands, World War I's chemical weapons and machine gun massacres, World War II's atomic bombs and industrial-scale slaughter, modern conflicts with smart bombs and automated killing machines. Every image you see represents millions of human deaths, explained calmly. We have been perfecting the art of killing for over 10,000 years. We've built weapons that can destroy entire planets. We've created poisons that can kill millions with a single drop. We've designed viruses that can wipe out entire species. She paused, letting the images sink in. And we used all of these weapons on each other, for sport, for resources, for ideas, for territory that would be destroyed in the fighting. Humans have been at war continuously for our entire recorded history. Doctor was trembling now. His voice came out as a whisper. Your species fights itself, constantly. Not just fights, corrected. We've been trying to exterminate each other for. The only reason humanity survived is that we're too stubborn to die and too clever to stay dead. Every war taught us new ways to kill. Every disaster taught us new ways to survive. She changed the display one final time. This image showed a human child, perhaps 10 years old, learning to use a knife in a survival training course. The child moved with confidence and skill, already more dangerous than most adults. This is a normal human child, explained. By age 10, every human knows how to make weapons from common materials, how to find food in poisonous environments, how to treat wounds in combat conditions, and how to kill efficiently in close quarters. These are not military skills on Earth. They are basic survival education. The scientists stared at the image in absolute horror. You teach your children to be killers. We teach our children to survive, corrected. On Earth, anything that cannot defend itself dies. Anything that cannot adapt becomes extinct. Anything that cannot fight is food for something stronger. This has been true for 4 billion years. She leaned back in her chair, studying their frightened faces. Your species evolved on a garden world where cooperation and intelligence were the keys to success. You became wise and peaceful because your environment rewarded those traits. Earth rewarded something very different. What? Doctor asked, though he seemed afraid of the answer. Survival of the most violent, replied. Earth didn't create philosophers and artists as the peak of evolution. It created weapons that could think. It created killers that could reason. It created survivors that could adapt to any threat, overcome any obstacle, and defeat any enemy. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the human ships patrolling nearby. Every human alive today is descended from billions of years of winners. Not the strongest, not the fastest, the most ruthless. The ones willing to do whatever it took to live one more day. The youngest scientist spoke up, his voice barely audible. How did you become civilized? How did such violent creatures build societies? Turned back to them with a predator's smile. Who says we did? We just learned to aim our violence outward instead of inward. We stopped fighting each other long enough to fight bigger threats. And now, Doctor, you've given us the biggest threat of all. What do you mean? You threatened our children, said simply. Every human on Earth has heard your ultimatum. You told us to surrender or watch our world burn. You threatened to destroy our families, our homes, our future. You've just made 7 billion apex predators angry. She walked toward the exit, pausing at the door. Your people have conquered the galaxy by fighting civilized species. You've never fought someone who evolved in hell. You're about to learn the difference. As the door closed behind her, Doctor turned to his colleagues with terror in his eyes. We must contact Admiral immediately. We have to tell him what we've learned. What have we learned? One of them asked. That we're not fighting a species, replied in a shaking voice. We're fighting evolution itself. We're fighting 4 billion years of natural selection that created the perfect predator, and we just threatened its young. Outside, looked up at the stars where the reinforcement fleet was approaching. Soon, they would arrive with overwhelming numbers, expecting to crush human resistance through superior firepower. They still believed they were fighting a primitive species with crude weapons. They had no idea they were about to face an entire planet full of creatures specifically designed by nature to kill anything that threatened them. The galaxy's perfect civilization was about to discover what happened when it met evolution's perfect weapon, and knew exactly how this war would end. The emergency session of the High Council took place in the sacred halls of Prime, the capital world of the greatest empire in galactic history. For 3,000 years, these halls had echoed with victory proclamations and reports of successful conquests. Today, they rang with something they had never experienced: fear. Supreme Commander stood before the assembled council, his 4 arms trembling as he delivered the most shocking military report in hegemony history. The holographic displays around him showed the unthinkable forces in retreat, ships destroyed, soldiers fleeing from a primitive species that should have surrendered within hours. Honored counselors, began, his melodious voice strained with stress, I bring grave news from the Earth campaign. Our initial invasion force of 50,000 ships has suffered catastrophic losses. Admiral requests immediate reinforcements and authorization for total extermination protocols. The ancient counselor leaned forward, her silver features twisted with disbelief. Catastrophic losses, from primitives with chemical rockets. Explain yourself, Commander. Activated the tactical displays, showing the nightmare statistics. In 6 weeks of fighting, we have lost over 20,000 ships. Human casualties are estimated at less than 50 million. Our casualty ratio is 20-1 in their favor. They are systematically destroying the most advanced military force in the galaxy using mining equipment and construction tools. The council chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Counselor stood abruptly. This is impossible. Our intelligence reports describe them as a fractured species with primitive technology. How can savages from a single planet defeat our finest warriors? Because, honored counselor, they are not savages, replied grimly. I have analyzed their world and species. Earth is classified as a Class XII death world, the most extreme rating possible. These humans are the product of 4 billion years of evolutionary warfare. They are literally designed to kill. He changed the display to show combat footage from Earth. Soldiers, armed with energy weapons and powered armor, fled in panic from human fighters carrying simple ballistic rifles. Human ships, built from commercial components, rammed cruisers in suicide attacks. Human civilians threw improvised explosives at landing craft with no regard for their own safety. They fight like demons, continued. They show no fear of death, no respect for superior technology, and no willingness to surrender under any circumstances. Our psychological warfare experts report that human morale actually increases when faced with impossible odds. Supreme Counselor, the oldest and of the leadership, spoke slowly. What does Admiral request? Total mobilization of all hegemony forces, sir. He wants the Grand Armada assembled and deployed to the Sol system. 2 million ships, plus auxiliary forces from all vassal species. He believes only overwhelming numerical superiority can crush human resistance. The council fell silent. The Grand Armada had never been fully assembled in the history of the hegemony. It was a force designed to fight an enemy that controlled half the galaxy, not a single primitive planet. But if Admiral was requesting it. Approved, declared. Send the call to all sectors, every ship, every alliance member, every vassal species. Assemble the greatest fleet in galactic history. These death will learn that the hegemony cannot be. The call went out across the galaxy within hours. 17 different alien civilizations received their orders to mobilize every available warship and join the holy crusade against the heretical humans. The hegemony's propaganda networks worked overtime, describing humanity as a cancer that threatened all civilized life. But not everyone in the galaxy was loyal to the hegemony. In hidden bases and secret meetings across hundreds of worlds, oppressed species heard different news. They heard that someone was finally fighting back. Someone was actually winning. Captain stood in the command center of humanity's hastily assembled fleet, watching the long-range sensors with grim satisfaction. Earth's combined space forces consisted of barely 2,000 ships, military vessels, converted cargo haulers, mining ships armed with industrial equipment, and civilian craft fitted with whatever weapons could be found. Sir, his communications officer called out, we're receiving coded transmissions from multiple sources across the galaxy. Non-hegemony species wanting to establish contact. Raised an eyebrow, show me. The main display filled with communication requests. The Mining Consortium, a loose alliance of asteroid miners who had been brutalized by taxation. The Rigel Trade Federation, merchants who had been forced to surrender most of their profits to hegemony tribute collectors. The Vegan Republic, scientists who had been enslaved to work on technology projects. They want to help, the communications officer explained. Dozens of species are offering ships, weapons, supplies, intelligence. They're calling it the Liberation Alliance. Smiled grimly, put me through to all of them. Within minutes, his image was being broadcast to rebel leaders across the galaxy. Human ships might look primitive compared to vessels, but himself projected an aura of dangerous competence that impressed even alien warriors. This is Captain of the Terran Defense Force, he began. I understand you want to join our fight against the hegemony. I need you to understand something first. This isn't going to be a clean, civilized war. We're not fighting for territory or resources. We're fighting for the right to exist. He paused, letting his words sink in. They offered us slavery or extinction. We told them to go to hell. Now they're coming back with everything. They have over 2 million ships, the largest fleet in galactic history. They think overwhelming numbers will crush our resistance. The alien leaders on the screen listened intently as continued. If you join us, you need to understand what you're signing up for. Humans don't fight wars the way civilized species do. We don't have rules about targeting civilian infrastructure. We don't have restrictions on weapon types. We don't have mercy for enemies who threaten our families. Commander Al of the mining consortium spoke up. Human, we have endured hegemony oppression for 800 years. We know what desperate warfare looks like. What we need to know is whether you can actually win. Smile turned predatory. Commander, let me tell you what we've learned about warfare in the past 6 weeks. They have spent 3,000 years fighting civilized opponents who follow the rules of engagement. They've never faced an enemy that treats war as a survival game where anything goes. He brought up tactical displays showing recent human victories. We've destroyed 20,000 of their ships using weapons they didn't even recognize as threats. We've turned their own technology against them by studying captured equipment. We've infiltrated their communications by hacking systems they thought were secure. Most importantly, we've learned their weaknesses. What weaknesses? Asked Director Ra of the Rigel Trade Federation. They're too civilized, replied. They expect their enemies to act rationally, to preserve their own forces, to avoid unnecessary casualties. They can't comprehend an opponent that treats sacrifice as a tactical advantage. Every time they've tried to force us into a conventional battle, we've done something completely insane that broke their tactical models. He pulled up footage of human pilots ramming cruisers with small fighters. Their computers literally cannot calculate responses to tactics that include deliberate self-destruction. Their warriors panic when faced with enemies that welcome death in battle. Their commanders make mistakes because they don't understand that humans fight harder when the odds are worst. The alien leaders exchanged glances. These humans were clearly as dangerous as the hegemony claimed, but their danger was directed at the enemy, not at potential allies. "We're in," Commander Al declared. "The mining consortium will provide ships and weapons. What do you need from us?" "Everything," replied simply. "Ships, guns, ammunition, supplies, and most importantly, crews willing to fight like their species' survival depends on it, because it does. If the hegemony wins here, they'll never stop. They'll hunt down every species that helped us and wipe them out completely." Within hours, rebel fleets across the galaxy began moving toward the Sol system. The mining consortium sent 300 heavy cargo ships converted into assault vessels. The Rigel Trade Federation provided fast scout ships and advanced sensor equipment. The Vegan Republic offered their most advanced scientists and their experimental weapons. But as the Rebel Alliance grew stronger, so did the hegemony response. Reports came in of massive fleets converging from across the galaxy. Battle groups that had been scattered across 1,000 worlds were uniting into an armada that dwarfed anything in galactic history. Stood on the bridge of his flagship, a converted asteroid mining vessel bristling with improvised weapons, and watched the enemy fleet approaching on long-range sensors. 2 million ships, carrying weapons that could crack planets and armies that had never known defeat. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "enemy fleet will arrive in 72 hours. They're broadcasting demands for our unconditional surrender." Laughed, and the sound carried across the communication channels to every human ship in the fleet. "Tell them we have a counteroffer. They can surrender to us and we'll let them live. Otherwise, they're about to learn what happens when you threaten a planet full of evolved killers." He opened communications to the entire fleet, human and alien vessels alike. "All ships, this is Captain. In 3 days, we face the largest invasion force in galactic history. They want to enslave our worlds and destroy our peoples. They think their numbers guarantee victory." His voice grew hard as steel. "They're wrong. We're not just defending Earth anymore. We're defending the idea that free beings don't bow to tyrants. We're fighting for every species that ever wanted to tell an empire to go to hell. And we're going to win because we're not trapped down here with them, they're trapped up here with us." The combined fleet prepared for the battle that would decide the fate of the galaxy. Humanity's allies were about to discover what humans really meant when they declared war. The Battle of Saul began at dawn on a Tuesday morning, Earth Standard Time. Admiral Sarah, daughter of the legendary Luna Base Defender, watched from the bridge of her flagship as the largest fleet in galactic history emerged from hyperspace. 2 million ships appeared in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming silver against the black of space. "My God," whispered her communications officer, "there are so many of them." Sarah smiled coldly. She had grown up hearing stories of her mother's last stand, of humans who chose death over surrender, of a species that got stronger when faced with impossible odds. "Number of enemies has never been our biggest concern, Lieutenant. Signal the fleet, all ships to battle stations." The human-led Liberation Alliance consisted of barely 50,000 ships, outnumbered 40-1. Their vessels were a patchwork of converted civilian craft, captured enemy ships, and improvised weapons platforms. Against them stood the Grand Armada, 3,000 years of military perfection, armed with weapons that could destroy planets and crewed by the galaxy's most elite warriors. Admiral, commanding from his massive flagship Universal Conquest, felt confident for the first time since this nightmare began. His scouts had reported the size of the enemy fleet, and the numbers were laughably small. Even accounting for human tactical skills, 50,000 ships could not stand against 2 million. "Open communications," he ordered. "Let me speak to these Death one final time." His image appeared on every ship in the human fleet, his 4 arms spread in a gesture of supreme authority. "People of Earth and your misguided allies, I am Admiral of the Hegemony. You are outnumbered 40-1 by the finest military force in galactic history. This is your last chance to surrender and face slavery instead of extinction." The response came from Admiral, her voice calm and steady despite the overwhelming odds. "Admiral, this is Admiral Sarah of the Terran Defense Force. We appreciate your generous offer, but we have a counter-proposal for you." "What proposal could you possibly make?" demanded. "Surrender now, and we'll let some of you live." For a moment the communication channel was silent. Then's laughter echoed across space, a sound like silver bells mixed with contempt. "You are insane. Begin the assault, destroy them all." The armada moved forward like a silver tide of death. Their weapons charged with enough energy to sterilize worlds. Their formation was perfect, their coordination flawless, their victory inevitable. That was when Sarah gave the order that changed galactic history forever. "Execute operation." What happened next broke every rule of civilized warfare that had existed for 3. The human fleet didn't retreat, didn't try to avoid the enemy advance, and didn't attempt to fight a conventional battle. Instead, they did something so insane that tactical computers literally could not process it. They attacked. 50,000 ships charged directly into the center of 2 million enemy vessels. Human pilots screamed battle cries over open channels as they dove their fighters into battleships. Converted cargo haulers rammed capital ships carrying nuclear explosives. Mining vessels used their industrial cutting beams to slice through enemy armor. But the real surprise came when the human ships began to explode. Not from enemy fire, but deliberately. Sarah's engineers had turned every human vessel into a potential bomb. When their ships took critical damage, instead of retreating for repairs, human crews detonated their own reactors in the middle of enemy formations. "They're using their own ships as weapons," screamed the tactical officer. "They're sacrificing themselves to take out our vessels." Admiral stared in horror as his perfect formation dissolved into chaos. Humans were ramming his ships with anything that would fly: fighters, shuttles, escape pods filled with explosives. They were using their own destroyed vessels as projectiles, hurling wreckage into his fleet at relativistic speeds. "This is impossible," he whispered. "No species fights like this. No civilized being would sacrifice themselves so willingly." His science officer provided the answer, his voice shaking with terror. "Sir, they're not fighting like a civilized species. They're fighting like predators. This is how apex predators behave when their territory is threatened. They fight until they win or until they die." The turning point came when Admiral ordered the most insane tactic in military history. "All ships, begin operation. Target the lunar mass drivers." Her engineers had spent months converting Earth's moon into the largest kinetic weapon ever created. Massive gravity engines, originally built for moving asteroids, had been attached to Luna's core. As the fleet pressed their attack, humanity played their final card. They launched Earth's moon at the enemy flagship. Luna, moving at a significant fraction of light speed, struck the universal conquest with the force of a dying star. The impact vaporized the massive ship instantly and sent shock waves through the entire formation. The psychological effect was even greater than the physical damage. Admiral's second-in-command, watching his leader's ship disappear in a flash of nuclear fire, broke completely. "They destroyed their own moon," he screamed over the command channel. "What kind of species destroys its own moon to win a battle?" The answer came from a human fighter pilot, her voice crackling over the radio as she rammed her damaged ship into a cruiser. "The kind that evolved in hell, alien. Welcome to Earth." As the battle raged, something unexpected happened throughout the galaxy. Species that had served the hegemony for centuries watched the impossible battle and began to remember what freedom looked like. If humans could stand against the entire galaxy and fight to a standstill, perhaps rebellion was possible. The mining consortium ships fighting alongside human forces began broadcasting to their enslaved worlds. "This is Commander Al. The hegemony fleet is breaking. Join the Liberation Alliance. Fight for your freedom." Across the galaxy, the hegemony's vassal fleets began switching sides. First a few ships, then entire squadrons, then whole battle groups. The Rigel Trade Federation openly joined the human fleet. The Vegan Republic activated their secret weapons reserves. Dozens of enslaved species saw their chance and took it. What had begun as the Empire's final solution became the largest rebellion in galactic history. Admiral, fighting from the emergency bridge of her battered flagship, received reports that should have been impossible. "Ma'am, enemy fleet is in full retreat. Multiple allied groups are reporting hegemony forces surrendering across 17 sectors." "Casualties?" she asked grimly. "Heavy, ma'am. We've lost 30,000 ships and about 2 million crew members. Enemy losses are estimated at 800,000 ships destroyed, with another 600,000 captured or surrendered." Sarah nodded. The numbers were staggering, but they told the story. Humanity had faced impossible odds and not just survived, but won. More importantly, they had inspired the galaxy to fight for freedom. 6 months later, Admiral sat in a prisoner transport, waiting to sign the peace treaty that would end the hegemony forever. The signing ceremony was taking place aboard humanity's new flagship, a massive vessel built from captured technology and human engineering. The ship's captain was Admiral Sarah, now commanding officer of the Liberation Alliance fleet. The conference room was filled with representatives from dozens of species, all working together to build a new galactic government based on cooperation instead of conquest. "Admiral," Sarah said formally, "do you understand the terms of the Terran Accords?" The former hegemony commander nodded weakly. "The Empire is dissolved. All member worlds become independent or join the new Galactic Cooperation Council. War crimes tribunals will be established. Reparations will be paid to enslaved species." "And," Sarah prompted. and Earth becomes a founding member of the new galactic government with full rights and protections. He looked up at her with something that might have been respect. I still don't understand how you did it. How did 50,000 ships defeat 2 million? Sarah smiled, but there was no cruelty in it. Admiral, you made the same mistake every empire makes. You assumed that superior numbers and technology would guarantee victory, but you forgot the most important factor in any war. What factor? The willingness to fight for something more important than your own life. Your people fought for conquest and glory. We fought for survival and freedom. Guess which motivation is stronger? As the treaty was signed, establishing the new Galactic Cooperation Council, news spread across the galaxy. Humanity, the species from the Death World, had not just survived their first contact with galactic civilization, they had liberated it. The final scene took place on a transport ship carrying the first human colonists to their new world beyond Sol. Admiral stood at the observation deck, watching as alien ships escorted the colony vessel through space. Representatives from dozens of species had volunteered to help humanity establish their first interstellar settlement. "Ma'am," asked the young communications officer beside her, "do you think we'll have peace now?" Sarah looked out at the stars, thinking of her mother's sacrifice and the billions who had died to reach this moment. "Lieutenant, humans don't fight for peace. We fight for the right to choose our own destiny. Now that we've won that right, we'll make sure no one ever tries to take it away again." The transport ship continued toward humanity's new home, escorted by the combined fleets of the Liberation Alliance. Behind them, Earth's blue marble shone in the light of its yellow sun, no longer the isolated world of a primitive species, but the capital of a new galactic age. The universe had learned an important lesson. Never threaten the children of a death world, and never, ever tell humanity that resistance is futile. They had spent 4 billion years proving that wrong, and they were just getting started.